Who's the other ghost?
Imagine it's 1975. You're 8 years old in your Superman pajamas, clutching a bowl of Lucky Charms, and you've just claimed the best spot on the shag carpet. The TV crackles to life, and suddenly you're transported to a world where cavemen fight crime, bears ride invisible motorcycles, and cereal mascots save the universe from soggy breakfast disasters. The golden age of animation was long gone, but the 1970s gave us something arguably better. Cartoons so wonderfully, unapologetically cheesy that they make Velveeta look sophisticated. Today we're counting down the 10 most deliciously ridiculous animated gems you probably forgot existed. 10. Schoolhouse Rock. What happens when you take the driest subjects known to childhood, grammar, math, and civics, and set them to catchy rock music? You get Schoolhouse Rock, the educational phenomenon that somehow made learning cool. Premiering in 1973, this wasn't technically a cartoon show, but rather a series of 3-minute animated segments that aired between Saturday morning programs. Picture a lonely little Bill sitting on Capitol Hill, singing his heart out about the legislative process. Or a conjunction junction where words literally function to hook up phrases and clauses. These weren't just educational tools, they were genuine earworms that buried themselves so deep in your brain that 30 years later, you're still humming lolly, 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 get your adverbs here. The animation was simple, almost crude by today's standards, but the songs were pure gold, created by advertising executive David McCall, who got the idea when his son struggled with multiplication tables. Schoolhouse Rock proved that cheese and education could coexist beautifully. It was learning disguised as entertainment, and somehow we fell for it completely. 9. Speed Buggy. Take Scooby-Doo's mystery-solving formula, replace the talking Great Dane with a sentient dune buggy, and you've got Speed Buggy, Hanna-Barbera's 1973 attempt to capitalize on both the custom car craze and their own successful monster hunting template. The show followed 3 teenagers and their anthropomorphic orange dune buggy as they raced around the world, inevitably stumbling into mysteries that needed solving. Speed Buggy himself was the real star, a lovable vehicle with a speech impediment who said things like "vroom zoom zoom," and somehow managed to express complex emotions through his headlight expressions. Voiced by Mel Blanc, the same genius behind Bugs Bunny, Speed Buggy had more personality than most human characters on television. The premise was absolutely ridiculous: a talking car that could think, feel, and apparently file insurance claims. But kids ate it up. Every episode followed the same pattern: arrive somewhere for a race, discover a villain, get chased, solve the mystery, win the race. It was formulaic cheese at its finest, and somehow it worked for 16 episodes of pure automotive absurdity. 8. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids. In 1973, someone at Hanna-Barbera looked at the success of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and thought, you know what this needs? Teenagers and musical numbers and secret agent missions. Thus was born one of the most bizarre cartoon concepts ever: historical outlaws reimagined as a teenage rock band who moonlight as government spies. The show followed 5 teenagers who performed as a pop group called the Sundance Kids, but were secretly agents working for a mysterious government contact. Between concerts, they'd receive coded messages through their equipment and jet off to exotic locations to stop international criminals. Because apparently, being a successful recording artist wasn't exciting enough. The cheese factor was off the charts. Each episode featured the kids performing original songs that were, well, let's just say they weren't troubling the Billboard charts. The animation was typical Hanna-Barbera quality, functional but hardly spectacular. But the sheer audacity of turning legendary outlaws into teenage secret agent pop stars was so wonderfully absurd that you had to admire the commitment to the concept, no matter how ridiculous it was. 7. The Funky Phantom. When Scooby-Doo became a massive hit, Hanna-Barbera did what any successful studio would do. They basically remade it with slight variations. The Funky Phantom, which debuted in 1971, was perhaps their most shameless attempt at capturing that mystery-solving magic, replacing the cowardly dog with a 200-year-old Revolutionary War ghost. The setup was wonderfully absurd. 3 teenagers take shelter from a storm in a spooky mansion and accidentally awaken Mudsie Muddlemore, a ghost who'd been hiding in a grandfather clock since 1776. Instead of being terrified, they essentially adopt him as their supernatural sidekick and travel the country in their Looney Dooney solving mysteries. Mudsie spoke in outdated colonial expressions and could turn invisible at will, which was helpful during chase scenes but raised questions about why a ghost needed to hide from anything. His cat, Boo, provided comic relief and occasional heroics. The show lasted only 17 episodes, but it perfectly captured the era's willingness to recycle successful formulas with increasingly desperate variations. It was derivative, predictable, and absolutely perfect Saturday morning fare for kids who couldn't get enough mystery-solving teams. 6. Goober and the Ghost Chasers. If the Funky Phantom was shameless Scooby-Doo copying, then Goober and the Ghost Chasers was downright brazen about it. Premiering in 1973, this Hanna-Barbera production didn't even try to hide what it was doing. They literally took the Scooby formula and made one crucial change. The dog was invisible. Meet Goober, a cowardly ghost-hunting dog who could only be seen when he was scared, which happened to be most of the time. He traveled with 3 teenagers, Ted, Tina, and Jilly, investigating supernatural mysteries in their van. Sound familiar? The twist was that Goober's invisibility was supposed to be an advantage, though he was usually too frightened to use it effectively. The show's voice cast included some heavy hitters, with Paul Winchell voicing Goober and using many of the same vocal tricks he'd perfected as Tigger. But even talented voice acting couldn't save the show from feeling like a transparent attempt to recapture Scooby's success. The mysteries were predictable, the villains were obvious, and the dog's gimmick felt more like a budget-saving animation trick than genuine innovation. It lasted only 16 episodes, making it one of Hanna-Barbera's shorter experiments in mystery-solving franchise expansion. 5. The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan. In 1972, Hanna-Barbera looked at the Charlie Chan detective films and thought, what if we gave him 10 kids in a van? The result was The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan, a show that somehow managed to be both progressive and problematic at the same time. Charlie Chan was reimagined as a contemporary detective with a huge family who helped solve crimes while touring the country as a rock band. Each of the Chan children had their own specialty. One was the tech expert, another was the muscle, one played music, and so on. They traveled in a bus solving mysteries that somehow always involved their musical performances. The show tried to present positive Asian American representation, which was rare for the era, but it also leaned heavily into stereotypes and featured voice acting that wouldn't pass today's standards. The mysteries themselves were standard Hanna-Barbera fare: criminals in masks, chase scenes, and last-minute reveals. But the sheer logistics of coordinating 10 children, their father, and their musical equipment while fighting crime made every episode feel like a family vacation gone horribly wrong. 4-inch high private eye. What's the most important quality for a private detective? Being observant, having good instincts? According to Hanna-Barbera in 1973, it was being exactly 1 inch tall. Inch high, Private Eye followed the adventures of a tiny detective who used his diminutive stature to solve crimes that would have stumped bigger investigators. Inch High Finkerton worked for the Finkerton Detective Agency, accompanied by his niece Lori, her boyfriend Gator, and his loyal dog Braveheart. The tiny detective could shrink down to solve cases, though the show never quite explained how he managed to apprehend criminals who were literally hundreds of times his size. Logic wasn't really the point. It was all about the visual gags of a minuscule man navigating a giant world. The show's charm came from watching Inch High deal with everyday obstacles that were mountainous challenges at his size. A simple staircase became an epic climb, and a gentle breeze could turn into a hurricane. The mysteries were secondary to the slapstick comedy of scale. 3. The Hair Bear Bunch. In 1971, Hanna-Barbera decided that Yogi Bear needed some competition in the bears causing trouble category. Enter the Hair Bear Bunch, 3 counterculture bears living in Wonderland Zoo who spent their time escaping their cages and driving their zookeeper absolutely insane. Hair Bear, Booby Bear, and Square Bear were clearly inspired by the hippie movement, complete with long hair, mod clothing, and anti-establishment attitudes. The bears had somehow acquired invisible motorcycles. Yes, invisible motorcycles, which they used to cruise around town after breaking out of their enclosure. Their nemesis was Mr. Peevely, the bumbling zookeeper, who could never figure out how the bears kept escaping or returning to their cages without his knowledge. His assistant Botch was even more clueless, creating a comedy duo that made the bears look like criminal masterminds. Each episode followed the same pattern. The bears would break out, cause elaborate havoc around town, then sneak back into their cages before getting caught. The show perfectly captured corporate America's attempt to understand and market to the youth counterculture movement, with middle-aged executives trying to figure out what made hippies tick. 2. Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. By 1977, Hanna-Barbera had perfected the art of combining successful formulas into increasingly bizarre combinations. Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels took Charlie's Angels, mixed it with the Flintstones, and somehow created something that actually worked. The show followed 3 crime-fighting teenage girls who had discovered a 2-million-year-old caveman frozen in ice and decided he'd make the perfect partner. The prehistoric hero could fly using his club as a helicopter, stored an impossible array of modern gadgets in his massive body hair, and had the attention span of a caffeinated toddler. His 3 partners, Brenda, Dee Dee, and Taffy, were clearly inspired by the Angels, but they did their own investigating and fighting. The show's genius was in its complete commitment to the absurd premise. Nobody questioned why a caveman would have modern crime-fighting skills or how he managed to store everything from telescopes to motorcycles in his hair. 1. Captain Crunch's Crunchling Adventures. And here we are at number 1, the moment when Saturday morning cartoons officially became indistinguishable from toy commercials. Captain Crunch's Crunchling Adventures wasn't just a cartoon, it was a 30-minute advertisement disguised as entertainment, and somehow we all watched it anyway. The show followed the seafaring cereal mascot and his crew of Crunchlings as they battled the evil Soggies, whose sole mission was to make breakfast cereal soggy. Yes, the primary conflict was about breakfast texture. Captain Crunch sailed the Milk Sea in the good ship Guppy, protecting the breakfast world from moisture-based terrorism. The Soggies were led by Squish, the Sogmaster, whose name alone tells you everything about the show's subtle approach to storytelling. And there you have it, 10 cartoons so beautifully, unapologetically cheesy that they make modern shows look downright sophisticated. Which forgotten gem deserves a comeback?